Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 617 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Thursday, so you know exactly what that means. We will be breaking down everything that happened over the last week across NXT and AEW. We have NXT coming off a fantastic Heatwave Premium live event, and AEW truly building now to All In Wembley Stadium coming up multiple weeks away. We actually have an even more loaded Thursday show than usual for you today, so we are truly not going to waste any time. Off the top, allow the Silver King to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So be sure to head on over to Apple Podcast and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, not only can you support the continuation of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get bonus audio, instant reactions, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling to all the major television shows, and exclusive news posts every Friday. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Now, I mentioned off the top, this is a more loaded show than usual. And that is because not only do we have your NXT Heatwave second look and a full breakdown of everything that happened on NXT to go through, not only do we have the Collision and Rampage from last week and the Dynamite from this week when it comes to AEW to break down. A lot has happened recently in the world of WWE and AEW. So we're going to get to NXT and AEW in a moment.
But I'm afraid I've got some news.
And we have a number of items for you today. First, WWE informed Damon Kemp that it will not be renewing his contract. Getting Over was able to confirm on Monday. That makes sense, of course, given he was, let's be honest, originally hired for his brother. Damon Kemp is Bobby Stevenson, brother of Gable Stevenson. And look, while Kemp was easily the better prospect between the two, and he definitely flashed on occasion, he never truly impressed and is certainly not someone WWE, I would say, is going to miss. No offense to him whatsoever. People need to remember that WWE is no different from the NFL or NBA or any other professional sports league, in that the bottom of rosters and the bottom of the talent pool is going to churn every single year, sometimes multiple times during the year. The truth is that teams cut players. Sometimes those decisions prove to be dumb, and you can have an undrafted free agent that gets cut from 3 teams and goes on to be a Pro Bowler. Most of the time, guys get one shot, and that's it. You never hear of them again. The average NFL career is 3 years, because for every guy who plays 12 years, you have dudes who get cut right off the practice squad. Kemp got a 3-year run in WWE. He was developed into a professional wrestler. I truly hope he gets a shot in TNA, maybe in New Japan. He would actually work pretty well over there. He could do Bloodsport. There's independent wrestling he can do, but it's tough to argue that he jumped off the page. I liked him, but there's also plenty of other dudes like him. And the fact that they were able to directly replace him in that group with Tavian Heights pretty much tells you exactly that. NXT Great American Bash will air on Tuesday, August 6th. So it's going to be a TV special. It feels weird not doing it in July because it's the Great American Bash, obviously. But the clear reason is that NXT is being pushed to Sci-Fi that day due to the Olympics. So WWE is trying to put a special show to kind of save the night, I guess is the best way to put it. Now, that was announced. Reported this week is that the next PLE for NXT will be No Mercy on Sunday, September 1st, the week before NFL season begins. And I believe there's only going to be one college football game on that day, is usually the way that works. So that's some great timing. This might be the Roxanne Perez-Julia match, which should obviously main event if that's going to be the case, but we're a ways out from that. What do I say? For 7 weeks, I think, from that. So there's plenty of time. Julia's about to do her big match in Marigold that, everyone's been waiting for. Whether she immediately jumps to WWE after that remains to be seen, but she should be there sooner than later. Also, some big news. Jordynne Grace's TNA contract is expiring this coming January, according to Fightful, 6 months from now. Fightful also reports it was originally supposed to end in the summer, but got amended and moved up. So now, let's just be candid, the countdown is on for her most likely to join WWE. At least one would assume. And you have to pretty much make that assumption because they were willing to adjust the contract for her because WWE is currently working with TNA. And let me tell you this right now. I want someone to remember that I'm saying it. I would not be shocked if she became the first wrestler in history to debut full-time for WWE in the Royal Rumble and straight up win it. It would be incredible. It would be quite a way to book her as a big deal right out of the gate. She has already flashed. She's made an impact in NXT. She flashed at the Royal Rumble this past year is what I was primarily talking about. So you've primed your audience to know who Jordynne Grace is. You bring her in. She wins that event. She goes right after a title, wins the title at WrestleMania. I mean, I don't know how you could have a better introduction than doing that. I'm not saying it's what's going to happen. I'm just saying, remember I said it. Stephanie Vaquer has been excused from her contracts with CMLL and New Japan. Now, she announced that Wednesday. There were reports coming out of AEW Forbidden Door that she had interest from both AEW and WWE. And we learned later Wednesday from Shawn Michaels himself on Twitter that not only has Stephanie signed with WWE, she will be starting in NXT. There was also a report that she was even backstage at NXT Heatwave in Toronto last week. Now, if there was one show to visit that would get you to sign with WWE's NXT, at least recently, it would have been that one. WWE is going to be in Mexico this weekend for 2 shows. It would make a ton of sense to bring her out there. And just to clarify, she's not Mexican. She's Chilean, but she just happens to work in Mexico. What needs to be said about Stephanie Vaquer, and you heard this on our Instant Analysis podcast, is that she straight up outshined Mercedes Moné in their Forbidden Door match. Signing her is just another indication that WWE is not only serious about its women's division, it's going all in. There is the potential for Vaquer, Julia, and Delta from Australia, go look her up if you're unfamiliar, to all be in NXT before the year is out. Julia could well be on the main roster by Royal Rumble or WrestleMania. And then you add in Jordynne Grace, like we just talked about, and that is a simultaneous infusion of female talent, the likes of which WWE has simply never acquired before. You have your Asuka, Kairi Sane, Io Sky, Saray. They were all one-offs. The 4 horsewomen were developed in NXT. This is almost the equivalent, or it could be almost the equivalent, of when WWE brought in the Radicals, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, 25 years ago. And that totally reshaped the roster at the time. I'm not even being hyperbolic. The WWE women's division is already immensely talented, and the future is currently being developed in NXT. But potentially bringing in those women would be such an injection of ability and star power and talent that it would level up the entire division almost immediately. Now, briefly, before we get into our full breakdown of NXT, a second look at NXT Heatwave. I don't actually have any match grade adjustments to discuss, so this is going to be super short. The main event, though, the NXT title, Trick Williams, Javon Evans, Ethan Page, and Shawn Spears, it really was an outstanding match. I mean, it's one where if you listen to the show for your NXT information and you don't watch the product generally, and you listen, oh, Silver King says to watch this, I'll go watch it. You need to watch this match. It's pretty much what I'm telling you. There's 2 matches on this show you absolutely have to see. It's this one. It's the tag team title match. And, the Roxanne Perez, Lola Vice, I don't necessarily think you need to watch the whole thing, but you could probably watch the last 5 minutes and get a pretty good idea of what that was. Mike Haase, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that name. Mike _HAASE wrote in, can't wait to see Javon Evans do the Kofi Kingston style saves in the Royal Rumble. I can't wait either. I'm not saying he's going to be in the Royal Rumble this coming year, but if he keeps flashing the way he has been, he could be one of those NXT entries that gets an opportunity. He would be amazing. Regarding the women's match, Perez and Vice, I didn't really like Lola kicking out at a flat 2 on the first Pop Rocks. I have to assume that was not planned, and it was probably just her mistake, but you don't kick out of someone's finisher that easily, so that's why I believe it just wasn't purposeful, but at the same time, if it was, I didn't like it. And lastly, obviously, I wanted to address this controversy, which should not be a controversy, around the women's North American title match, Kalani Jordan and Sol Ruca. Now, anyone who watched this match or listened to our instant analysis knows exactly what it was, which was a wrestling match. Let's be very clear about this. It was a wrestling match that utilized the gymnastic skill and acrobatic skill of its competitors to not only entertain the fans, but literally tell the story of the match. I think what a lot of people are missing here is that these are both baby faces who are both collegiate gymnasts who literally trained together in kayfabe for the match. So the idea of them being able to counter each other and do some of those flips and moves at the very beginning of the match was part of the story for the match itself. The other thing that needs to be clarified is the opening sequence of this match was not the entire match. It became a more normal wrestling match after the first, let's call it 45 seconds or so. The closest comparison that everyone has made to this match, and I'm not talking about the quality of the match in totality, I'm just talking about the opening of the match, was that Will Ospreay Ricochet fight from 2016, I believe it was in New Japan. The opening sequence of both matches is almost a reenactment of one another. And just like in that Ospreay Ricochet match, I did not like the start of Kalani and Sol because it was too much gymnastics. It pulls you away from the suspension of disbelief too much to believe they would do things like that. If you had to pick one or the other in terms of which one made more sense, it would actually be Kalani and Sol because they're literally gymnasts. They're not two people immediately right off the gate trying to beat the shit out of each other like you would expect in a match between Ospreay and Ricochet. But again, they were the same. So as far as I'm concerned, if I'm criticizing one, I'm going to criticize the other. I didn't like it when Ospreay and Ricochet did it in 2016, and I didn't like it at the beginning when Jordan and Ruca did it here in 2024. But what people are missing about both matches is that once those sequences ended, there were wrestling matches. So the criticism of, oh, I didn't like 45 seconds of something at the beginning means the entire thing was shit, or the entire thing wasn't wrestling is absolutely ridiculous. We just talked about this on Tuesday when it came to women's Money in the Bank. How did that match start? With comedy. Okay, you had Chelsea Green in the ring trying to jump and grab the briefcase, doing all this, wacky stuff. And then it ended, and the rest of the match was an absolute banger. Now, I liked the Chelsea comedy at the beginning, but guess what? I was happy they put it at the beginning, not in the middle of a match, which is why there are so many Orange Cassidy matches that bother me. If you want to do something fun right off this jump, it may not be my taste, but at least get it out of the way. Don't beat the shit out of each other for 15 minutes, then give me 2 minutes of comedy and then start beating the shit out of each other for another 10 minutes. That doesn't necessarily work for me. But the problem I have with this conversation around Kalani and Sol, going back to that, is the idea that Ospreay and Ricochet could kind of get away with that at the beginning of the match because they are such great wrestlers on the back end, and that match can get 4.75 stars. But when it comes to Kalani and Sol, because they did the same sequence at the beginning, it was a gymnastics exhibition and not a real wrestling match, which is absolute bullshit. Now, if you go over to Cage Match, which you guys know I've said it on the show, is a great resource when it comes to being a database and being able to look up historical information. When it comes to the fan match grades on there, you take them with a grain of salt. It's a very small percentage of audience that is voting on these things. And the people more inclined to vote on a match on Cage Match are people who are heavily on the IWC, who probably subscribe to certain newsletters and have certain tastes about wrestling, as opposed to the common fan who watches WWE or maybe even watches AEW. So I sent a tweet about this, and this is why I was so frustrated, because Ospreay and Ricochet did receive a level of criticism, but it was given 4.75 stars. Sol and Kalani were given 10 times as much criticism, and their grade, I guess, hasn't come in yet. Their rating for their match hasn't come in. I'm going to be very curious to see what it is. But if you do look at just the cage match users, what did those people think about these two matches, right? Because that's the only metric that we have where we can really, discuss the difference. Well, I'll tell you what they thought. They thought the Ospreay Ricochet match was like 9.23, and they thought the Sol Kalani match was like 8.46. And guess what? That's probably correct. The Ospreay Ricochet match was exceptional. It had a start that I didn't like. The Kalani Sol match was very, very good, and it had a start I didn't like. But the key at the end of the day for both of them is they were both wrestling matches. Period. End of sentence. Okay, let's get off the bullshit and get into the breakdowns of NXT and AEW. We will kick it off with NXT, and a reminder that we have timestamps in the episode description. We have this for every show, not just our Thursday shows, for all the segments on the WWE edition as well. But there are timestamps in the episode description. So if you want to jump to AEW or you want to listen to AEW first, jump back to NXT, you can do that. But as always, I do hope you listen to the entire show. So Ethan Page opened NXT flanked by 5 security guards. He obviously bragged about his win and fought through some loud chants saying everyone backstage hates him, hence the protection. Security successfully stopped Oro Mensah from attacking as Page thanked Ava from banning him for Heatwave. Then he promised to prevent outsiders from trying to ruin what NXT has built, saying it is now the era of ego. Trick Williams cut his own music, demanding an immediate rematch, so Page riled him up and denied him. Out came Shawn Spears, wanting appreciation for aiding in the victory. Then Javon Evans insulted the old dudes, and that led to a brawl. I kept expecting someone surprising to show up, just given the way this was paced, but Page was excellent, being insufferable, no-selling the crowd, and just easily getting his point across and earning extra heat. The rest of it was rather formulaic and overall kind of lacking for a show opening segment coming off a really hot PLE. Trick continued to show that intensity, though, the newfound intensity. That was a great positive. And this did lead to an expected main event tag team match being scheduled. Now, Brooks Jensen sat down with Ava, his beard all unkempt. He apologized to her and Shawn Michaels for getting into his own head, and he wished he could take everything back. They found a common ground about being part of wrestling families. Ava said they almost released him, but a few people vouched for him, so he's now getting a second chance. But on this second chance, he has to carry himself as a WWE superstar 24/7 and not slip up anymore. This was kind of similar to those corny, like C-level skits that NXT does from time to time. Very robotic, very scripted, probably used multiple takes, and yet it still wasn't great. I just thought it could have been better. Now, I presumed that there was another character element to this. At least I hoped that would be the case, because Jensen walking back in and doing it so easily and just getting accepted back was pretty boring. At first blush, he was no different than when he walked away. The only intriguing element was who would potentially have vouched for him. That, and he also said he would make an impact, which may or may not have been a TNA tease. Now, all of this resolved itself moments later, when Jensen was in a wife beater, destroying Evans with a full beatdown into a storage case. Josh Briggs ran up, asking what the hell he's doing, saying he vouched for him, and Jensen repeated he was just trying to make an impact. Trick was infuriated later, saying he would go 2-on-1, but quickly came to his senses, realizing that was not smart, so he decided he would go and find a tag team partner. Just then, as he walked away, Joe Hendry's face flipped around on the TV screen behind him. The heels later scoffed at Trick's misfortune and talked some shit. Ava scolded Jensen with Briggs by his side in her office. Briggs said he would take responsibility for Jensen until he gets his mind right. So Ava set Jensen against Evans next week, and Briggs was ready to get his back, but Brooks stared him down the entire time. He said he would do it on his own. Then Briggs demanded Spears one-on-one, given the injury that kept him out for a month. Stevie Turner suggested Briggs as a fill-in partner, so Robert Stone laughed, saying, "I can't believe you just said his name," obviously not referring to him, but Hendry. As I said, the disappointment of Jensen's initial kind of return segment, that was resolved quickly through these follow-ups. Briggs being willing to get his back, but Josh now wanting nothing to do with him when previously all he wanted was for them to remain a team. That's really interesting. I'm mostly curious to see Jensen's presentation next week. Is he wearing the same stupid gear with the same stupid music, or is he going to have a repackaging? Perhaps this was not as impactful overall as I expected coming out of last week, but I'm okay with the slow burn as long as it pays off nicely in the end. Now, this was not the rest of what we saw with Ava, because Cedric Alexander walked out of Ava's office with she and Stevie Turner saying they were excited for next week. Cedric said NXT was on fire and he would contribute however possible. It came across to me like he has fully moved to that brand, which to say,
in the dark, I feel at home. Time has passed and now I've grown. Used to dream I'd have it all. Now it's mine, I won't let go. In the dark, I feel at home. Time has passed and now I've grown. Used to dream I'd have it all. Now it's mine, I won't let go.
This is a Cedric Alexander podcast. I don't know how many of you are aware of that. We haven't really been talking about him over the last couple of years because WWE hasn't really been using him since the Hurt Business ended. But the Silver King could not be any more excited to get Alexander down in NXT. Stone then walked up with his own recruit, which just so happened to be Ashanti the Adonis. Ava took him into her office to discuss options. I simultaneously hate that these guys got sent down because they were building that tag team on SmackDown, and I thought they were going to do something. It looked pretty damn interesting. But now they're getting an opportunity, and that's super important. With Baron Corbin and Apollo Crews back up, it made sense to do this. What I wonder, though, is like, all right, Corbin and Apollo are back up. I mean, they've made a couple appearances on TV. Crews did have that one really good match. Corbin was, I think, in the King of the Ring tournament, but he lost, and he hasn't had a match since. I do think he has a match coming up this coming Friday. But, like, they're not exactly being used, and that is a trend. When WWE has sent main roster talent down to NXT and then brought it back up, it hasn't necessarily been utilized like you would think. And Corbin is, I mean, a really good hand. Crews is great in the ring, you know, against anyone that you need from a character standpoint. Maybe there's not much there, but I mean, Corbin was like main eventing shows. He main evented a premium live event, back then a pay-per-view with Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch and obviously Lacey Evans as well. So like, this is a guy who you can fully utilize. Dijak was down and back up, and he wasn't used, and then he got released, or I guess his contract didn't get renewed. So on one hand, I'm really excited for Alexander, and to a lesser extent, but still excited for Adonis. On the other hand, I'm, kind of concerned. Look, here's the truth. Alexander is one of the most overlooked and underutilized talents in WWE. And again, when that team seemed like a possibility, I was like, well, they need to boost that tag team division. So that makes a lot of sense to put them together. Now, I don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to work singles? Are they going to get TV time as a tag team to kind of build themselves together and then move that team back to the main roster? I don't know. If I'm, Shawn Michaels, and I guess Ava to a lesser extent, but really Shawn Michaels, if I'm in charge of creative in NXT, I'm strapping up Cedric immediately. I don't even care what title it is. Tag team title, North American title. Just do it. The Heritage Cup, let this dude cook and remind everyone what he can do when he has a chance. And the other cool thing is now that we have this NXT and TNA relationship, the idea of getting Mustafa Ali against Cedric Alexander for the TNA, I want to say X Division title, I believe is what they have down there, is huge. Doing it on NXT or at a premium live event, that would be awesome too. So there's a lot of chances and potential possibilities here with Alexander and NXT. And I'm probably spending more time on this than pretty much anyone else this week. But I'm excited about it, and I really hope Cedric gets a chance to shine. I also hope they bring that song back, because that's one of the greatest entrance themes that WWE has put out in probably the last 7 years. And the fact that he doesn't use it anymore is an absolute shame. So continuing with like the storylines of what happened on Tuesday, Trick Williams and an opponent to be determined were scheduled for Paige and Spears in the main event. Hendry did indeed appear as Trick's surprise partner. Massive pop from the crowd, which actually knew the words to his song and knew the movements to his song. He had a TNA nameplate. Vic Joseph called out his entire resume. As Paige tried to save Spears, Mensah attacked and ran him through the crowd out of the PC. Hendry got the hot tag, with the faces now having a 2-on-1 advantage. He had a fallaway slam and posed. Williams caught Spears with a trick shot ringside. Then Hendry hit a choke slam for the win, and Trick dapped him up after the bell. But it was really funny. It's one of those black guy, white guy situations where like Trick goes for the dap, Hendry opens his hand, then Trick opens his hand and Hendry goes for the dap. I just loved it. It was really corny, but really like appropriate, I guess is probably the best way to put it. Not to rain on any parades here, okay? But I wish this was telegraphed a lot less. The ending shot on Heatwave was cool. A singular mention during the show would have been okay. But it was like 10 different teases, which I don't want to say ruined the moment, but it did lessen the surprise a little bit. Now, if you've never seen him before and only know about his viral social media stuff, you quickly realized here that Hendry, for all of his great characteristics, is, not that special in the ring. He's 36. I'm not sure he's going to be someone that WWE ever signs, despite being on a hot spell right now. And that kind of makes this almost a best case scenario for NXT, which gets to utilize him occasionally for a ratings pop without buying into the whole gimmick, while you have TNA simultaneously getting the rub from a WWE show that just straight up dwarfs its own ratings. All in all, a fun main event that got Hendry over big. The fact that a TNA guy pinned a WWE talent who just main evented a PLE is kind of wild if you think about it. Also, glad they had Mensah come back and attack Paige. That title feud needs to happen probably right away. I would do that on TV and then figure out something, of course, for No Mercy in however many weeks, 7-8 weeks from now. Wes Lee opened hour 2 of NXT addressing his future, seemingly for what? The third time in the last 18 months. The crowd was hot for him. He put over Obafemi, but explained how he failed at the singular goal that kept him motivated while rehabilitating from surgery. Wes said he had a blast in NXT, but now it's time for him to start stepping away. And I was sitting here thinking, just being candid about what he said. First of all, his promo was better than anything he did with Oba over the last month plus. But secondly, okay, you didn't win the North American Championship. What about the NXT title? What about, I don't know, the Intercontinental Championship or the United States Championship or the WWE or the World Heavyweight? Like, there are so many other options in WWE. Just because you didn't win a mid-card title doesn't really make sense to step away and give up and quit. But okay, I digress. It was for a storyline reason. Just as he said that, the old MSK theme hit with not just Zach Wentz, but Trey Miguel, the Rascals, from TNA showing up in NXT. Wes immediately started crying, asking what they're doing there. Miguel said he couldn't believe it either. More on that in a second. Lee said he's proud of what they've done in TNA. Miguel said they're the best tag team in NXT history, meaning he and Wentz. Wentz suggested that MSK and the Rascals both get back together, and they all hugged each other 3-way in the ring. So the background here is that Wentz, who went by Nash Carter, you will remember in NXT, was fired by WWE after his ex-wife, Kimberly, leaked pictures of him, imitating Hitler and raising his arm in a photo. Words that I don't expect that I would say on this podcast. Now, it was apparently an old photo of him, and it was also him, just being stupid while shaving his mustache, which is something that if you're a guy and you have facial hair or you can grow facial hair and you shave, you maybe are not doing that, what he specifically did, but you shave weird designs and you wash your face and you see how stupid it looks, and then you shave the rest of your face. So it's not something that is the most abnormal, offensive type of thing if you put it in that context, but obviously it was not something WWE could abide by, so they released him. Now, word at the time was that he would likely get a chance to return in the future. That was 2 years ago. They pretty much wanted things to blow over. In the meantime, he signed back with TNA. Miguel, who was 1/3 of the Rascals with Wes Lee and Nash Carter / Zach Wentz, he was offered a chance to join WWE along with both of those guys. He turned down the opportunity, saying the other guys were married, they needed stability. He didn't want to move to Orlando. He also had some family stuff going on too, and I believe it included like a new niece was just born or something like that. So for all of this to come together here was super special for all three of those guys. And there are some interesting elements here. Miguel recently on TNA got attacked by No Quarter Catch Crew. So Wes helping out for a trios match down there would make a ton of sense. The question is what this means for NXT. Surely they're going to do something together in WWE. But I am going to presume that Wentz and Miguel are still signed to TNA and will be, at least for now. Wes has been excellent as a single star in NXT, and he's never fully gone after the main title. Also, with Ricochet departing, and they're not the same guy by any means, but there is a spot for someone like him on the main roster. So it's going to be really curious to see how this plays out. So far, so good. This was a super cool moment. One match, though, that absolutely needs to happen at some point is MSK against Nathan Frazier and Axiom. That would be absolutely ridiculous. Let's keep going. Tyson DuPont and Tyreek Igwe fought Gallus. The faces attacked the heels during their entrance. Gallus did something I've never seen before, a crucifix pinning combination, but not actually going for the fall. Rather, it was used so one of the guys could be like prone in the ring, and Wolfgang just dropped the knee on his head. I thought it was awesome. The faces got a bit more offense. Gallus ultimately won with their standard finisher. The intensity was super high throughout. Gallus ultimately won easily, as should have been the case, given the difference in experience. With the storyline coming into this, it probably should have been a street fight in the first place. It could have gone longer if they did that. The Rascals were celebrating backstage. Gallus approached talking shit. Basically, it was an entree for a 6-man match at some point in the future. We had the Heritage Cup on the line. Tony D'Angelo defending against Lexis King. This was largely built through social media and briefly last week's exchange. Eddie Thorpe, for some reason, had his DJ equipment in the crow's nest. Now, I was reminded by a listener, I'm sorry, I missed your tweet, so I can't give you a direct shout out. But the DJ hobby was part of Thorpe's original introduction into NXT, but it was quickly dropped. And now it's kind of just randomly getting brought up again. Now, King's beard was all types of ridiculous, but like in the best way. He was saved by the bell in round 1. And what we learned was that Thorpe was there to play 15 seconds of music between rounds. D'Angelo hit Forget About It off the distraction to lead 1-0 in round 2. King caught D'Angelo with a drive-by knee and coronation to even it up after round 3. Then D'Angelo countered a second coronation attempt into basically an almighty spinebuster to win 2-0 and retain the cup in round 4. This was a nice match, all things considered. Probably the best King has actually wrestled since joining NXT, and D'Angelo retaining obviously made sense. The Thorpe element was totally nonsensical, even if it did build off their brief interaction a week ago. I'm totally down if he wants to lean away from the Native American gimmick. That's his prerogative. But this ain't it, as far as I'm concerned. And yes, I do appreciate the overall absurdity of having a mafia guy use an EDM DJ to distract an egotistical, nepo, fake rock star. Like, I get that it's so ridiculous that it's good in one way, but at the same time, it is still super ridiculous. Ridge Holland found Chase U backstage, putting them over for a great performance at Heatwave. He said he wanted to atone for his mistake and make it up to them as a group. So he got 2 matches made. Thea Hale against Izzy Dame with the goal of impressing Ava, and then Duke Hudson in a North American title match against Obafemi next week. There was a mixed reaction from the group other than Hale, who was obviously excited and crazy like usual. Ridge, I think, has shown more personality over the last 3 weeks than the entirety of his career to this point. It is wild how Chase U simply revitalizes wrestlers who appear to be lost character-wise. Remember when Hudson was doing the stupid-ass poker gimmick? He's been totally repaired. Holland is in the process of being saved. So we got Hale against Dame. Tatum Paxley hopped on the barricade, which immediately distracted Izzy, who attacked only for Tatum to dodge her into the ring post. Thea capitalized with a ton of offense, including an arm breaker plus a Kimura lock for a submission of the much larger Dame. This was chaotic as hell, exactly how you would execute, though, a short match in a sensible fashion. Surprised to see Hale tap out Dame, but it was a nice development. Femi appeared in the crow's nest immediately after the bell, telling Hudson that Holland went to bat for him, but it was a mistake because he'll destroy him. Duke said he should not be underestimated, especially since he tore the roof off the place in Toronto, is the MVP of Chase U, and got Trish Stratus's attention while over there. Easily, Hudson's best promo in NXT by a mile. I wish the crowd reacted better to it. That was a little disappointing. NXT Anonymous found Paxley cutting a promo to a Barbie doll version of Izzy, saying cool girls like her don't want to play with Tatum. She said titles will always be there for her to pursue, but she can take care of girls like her first. Then she threw it on the floor, only for Wendy Chu to walk in and pick it up. So that's fine and all, right? But Tatum needs more than just a lower mid-card feud at this point. Unless she was injured, which I guess is possible, she should have been elevated up this card immediately coming out of the Lyra Valkyria story. Paxley and Chu aligning would be more interesting if there was like a women's tag team title in NXT, or if the champions came down there more frequently, which they don't and they should. I just want to see Tatum used better. I mean, she really flashed in TNA. She flashed with Lyra, and it just feels like she's kind of lost right now. Carmen Petrovic fought Ariana Grace. JC Jane and Jasmine Nix immediately came out to watch. Petrovic landed her falling spin kick to Grace's back for the win in 3 minutes. Fallon Henley then attacked Carmen from behind and posed over her body. This didn't get much reaction, unfortunately. She yelled to Jane and Nix that she was sick of the rookies. Again, Nix is literally a rookie. It's one thing for Grace to get squashed by like Michin or Lola Vice, both of which happened in May. There's no reason Carmen should have beaten her this easily. The post-match was fine. Henley is doing fine as a heel. It's just that no one really wants to boo her. No one's buying into it. Later, we had Sol Ruca against Henley. Fallon had cut a social media style selfie promo saying Sol completely wasted her title spot, but if she was in that position, she would have beaten Kalani Jordan herself. Then she threatened Lonnie. Sol watched the promo, put over Lonnie, but said Fallon was just bitching while she was constantly putting in the work. Strong promos from both of them, actually. Henley basically hit a house call. Ruca flipped her over for a cool pinning combination and hit those single-step springboard shoulder strikes. Someone forgot a spot, so all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it got clunky, and it was really smooth until that. Ruca hit Soul Snatcher off the ropes, only for Jane and Nyx to attack and get a disqualification. Another extremely light reaction from the crowd for the heels, who are now clearly working together after like a will they or won't they type of deal for the last few weeks. I maintain it still doesn't make much sense as a trio, those three, Henley, Nyx, and Jane, despite the fact that I like all three of them individually. Unfortunately, the way the match ended with Soul and Fallon, it just kind of left a sour taste more than anything else. And again, just like with earlier, I wish it got a better reaction, but it should be telling NXT something that it's not getting a better reaction. No Quarter slammed a car trunk with Charlie Dempsey screaming, "Mistakes won't be tolerated." This was officially the write-off for Damon Kemp. Tavian Heights remarked, "Do you guys do this often?" Which got a laugh out of me because it's how they wrote off Drew Gulak. As the guys were getting into the car to handle the business themselves, Ren Sinclair walked by, froze like a deer in headlights, and said, "I didn't see nothing." Now, I would have on one hand liked if they enlisted the D'Angelo family again, but this time paid them up front for their time, just for the continuity reasons. But I guess they couldn't really do that because they lost the Heritage Cup and presumably won it back. And then, on the other hand, you have Dempsey's character, who's been trying to act like a mob boss of late. So this was actually continuity from that standpoint. Plus, he did it poorly by getting caught, proving he's not good at it. So it does make sense why they ultimately did it this way. Out the mud fought Good Brothers. OTM got a walk and talk promo on their way to the ring. Nice to see some personality from the guys and not just Jada Parker. Bronco Nemo wore a face mask, I guess, for a broken nose. He did a super delayed vertical suplex of Luke Gallows that was pretty impressive. Lucian Price also had a really nice one-arm toss Uranagi with the OC selling their asses off while getting manhandled. Michin came out of the crowd after Parker with security separating both of them. Carl Anderson took a cheap shot to the back during this. Then he ate OTM's pendulum bomb finisher for the upset victory. So Nima just pinned a G1 finalist in Carl Anderson. That is quite a development. Now, credit to the OC for doing the job, obviously. I know there was a distraction, but man, that's tough to buy, just given how inexperienced OTM continues to look. They're huge, young dudes, so I guess that's fair enough. They have the youth, they have the size. I figured Parker Michin was over. I'm hyped that it's continuing. Hopefully, it's not only a mixed 6-person match, because I want to see Michin get her lick back, like with another hardcore type of stipulation against Jada. NXT, I thought overall was an excellent show top to bottom. So much new talent is getting featured. The injection of the TNA wrestlers, it makes the product feel fresh and reinvigorated. We spoke about the usable roster kind of thinning out from an experience standpoint a few weeks ago. Since then, Ethan Page and Sean Spears plus TNA talent have come through. Stephanie Vaquer and Julia are coming in, signing select independent wrestlers and then using TNA as needed for like additional veteran talent. That is a really smart way to keep the focus on developmental while still bringing in names for people who don't have a taste to watch developmental wrestling, and also talent like Stephanie, like Julia, that needs just a little bit of seasoning in the WWE quote unquote way of things before they go to the main roster. It almost kind of feels now that NXT is morphing from white and gold, but maybe not back to black and gold, but like silver and gold or something like that. And when you combine what we saw at Heatwave with what this TV edition brought, there's just a lot to like about NXT right now. Now let's move over to AEW, where we still have a ton to talk about on this show. So whereas last week I said Dynamite was one of the best shows of the year, that may not have been the case this week, but there were two really strong matches, and it did have among the best endings of the year for any AEW show, if not the best, and among the best women's segments in company history, if not the best. So 2 weeks in a row, I can definitely say AEW is headed in the right direction, at least in some facets. Now, in terms of the storyline relevant matches, there was a downturn from last week. That was understandable, and it was expected. 5 of 14 matches had storyline relevance, which is 36%. That's a respectable number. It's better, certainly, than the 19 and 24% like we've been talking about. But 4 of those 5 matches were Owen tournament matches. So there's only one match across, 5 hours of AEW television that was not part of a tournament that was storyline relevant. That's obviously not exactly the most creative booking. The problem, again, was Collision and Rampage, not Dynamite. There was also a good amount of build for next week's Dynamite, which is the 250th episode, a landmark, obviously. They're going to do a special. It wasn't even mentioned until well into Dynamite this week. It's going to be in Little Rock, Arkansas. Right now, there's less than 2,000 tickets sold. Now, I'm not criticizing them about tickets sold or anything, but I am criticizing them about the planning of that. Like, if you're going to do 250, why are you not doing that in a bigger city where you can draw? That's kind of strange. And sure, you can load the card and maybe you end up selling 3,000, maybe 4,000 seats, but for episode 250, that should be a deal. And I know they have Blood and Guts coming up. I get it. That makes me wonder if maybe they should have done Blood and Guts now and put all these other big matches on the same show. I don't know. It's just a little confusing the way they're doing it. Something else I enjoyed from Dynamite, though, is they did not use the LED boards on and around the ring. And it kind of felt like a throwback look, which was a huge positive because it's something that used to visually differentiate AEW from WWE. We spoke a few weeks ago about how AEW was starting to look a lot like WWE from a visual standpoint. And stuff like this, the big screen-wide title graphics for those matches, so on and so forth, it was too much almost. I would love to see a regression backwards, and I hope this is just the start of that. So we're going to go ahead and break down all 5 hours of AEW from the last week. We're going to do it based on storylines, so you'll hear Collision mixed in with Dynamite, mixed in with Rampage, but as always, we will get to everything before we are done. On Collision, Christian Cage and the Patriarchy backstage said they wanted the trio's titles for the family. He didn't even realize Bang Bang Gang were the champions. He basically said everyone else in the faction is a loser except Jay White, so he would revive the titles and pave his road back to the world title while giving White an exit from a go-nowhere group. Then Kip Sabian walked over, saying he had lost his father. He was looking for sympathy, but Cage and Luchasaurus just beat him up instead. Interesting that they're having Christian speak about the reality of White being a disappointment since signing with AEW, though that is entirely on booking and obviously not Jay himself. The stuff with Sabian was weird because it was like, well, they could have just added another member to that faction, someone who could take falls and get beaten easily. I thought that would have been a good idea, but like it's another instance of him just showing up on TV, getting his ass kicked, and then we won't see him again for 3 months. So I just don't understand what the deal is with that guy. He's super talented, so it's really weird. Also on Collision, House of Black did their normal tape promo saying revenge for Buddy Matthews is not a straight line, but an imbalanced scale, reminding that they feel nothing, but will make Christian pay. I enjoy concurrent storylines happening, but there's really nothing tying these together, so it's just kind of strange that it's being booked that way. On Collision, we had Hangman Page against Jay White in an Owen semifinal. Earlier in the show, Page said he's angry at the Young Bucks because they only brought him back when they thought they could use him. He promised to burn through the tournament and right the wrong created by Swerve Strickland, burning his world to the ground. Pretty strong from Hangman. Midway through the match, Page bladed to a ridiculous degree, full Crimson Mask. There were some excellent counters here. Hangman did an apron powerbomb on White. He collapsed during a buckshot lariat attempt and then caught Page in a small package for a 3.1 that was not counted. Hangman came back with a pop-up powerbomb before White countered a buckshot into a Uranagi. Page escaped Blade Runner. White escaped Deadeye before getting thrown into the referee. Hangman hit Deadeye for no count, so he choked and hit Jay with his belt, randomly leading Jeff Jarrett down to rip it away from him for fairness. White dumped Page on his head with a suplex, only for Christian to spear him out of nowhere. Hangman then hit Buckshot Lariat to win in 16 minutes. This match was strong, taken down a peg by the interference in the referee spot. Hangman worked really well as a heel, and while the level of blood was obviously unnecessary, it did add to his psychotic look. White sold his ass off the entire time and actually kind of looked pathetic in a way. I'm going to assume that's a character point. They did it on purpose. As far as Jarrett goes, I figured he might like weasel his way into a referee or enforcer spot for the final on Wednesday. That was my thought watching it Saturday. 4 stars, A-. On Dynamite, Bryan Danielson fought Hangman in the Owen final. Jarrett was indeed the enforcer for this match, though he just stood on the ramp. He was watching the heel tunnel, but Page entered from the face tunnel because, of course, he thinks he's the hero of the story, which I'll remind you, just like Drew McIntyre, he is indeed the baby face. The only reason he's heel is because crowd turned on him. Hangman spit at him, being Jarrett, and was aggressive right at the bell. Danielson bladed almost immediately. Page took a spider German suplex off the ropes, literally right on his effing head. The referee did check on him. Hangman avoided a flying headbutt. Minutes later, ripped off the pad behind the top turnbuckle, driving Bryan's head into it before hitting a tombstone pile driver. Danielson pushed him off the top rope onto the ring apron, then did his first springboard move in probably, forever. Hangman then hit a pile driver ringside with Bryan reblading. Page interrupted a trainer checking on him and shoved Jarrett in the face. Danielson stumbled and crawled and threw himself into the ring, obviously showing symptoms of a head injury that in reality would have led the trainer checking on him to immediately stop him from competing and end the match. Hangman ripped the Kinzio tape off of Bryan, who came back with a Bazaiku knee with no cover. Hangman then dodged another one, with the referee getting knocked out. Hangman took off his belt, so Double J came in, got shoved, and revealed a referee shirt. Page rolled through a label lock for a Deadeye false finish. Tony Schiavone told us for the 5th time that it was an incredible match. Hangman landed buckshot lariat to the back of Bryan's head. So this guy, who was nearly knocked out cold from this move and nearly concussed to the point that he couldn't continue the match earlier, stood up and then avoided a second buckshot lariat to the front. Page then locked him in a crossface, but Danielson didn't tap, and he rolled him to the side for a surprise 1-2-3 to win the Owen. Jarrett and Martha awarded Bryan the title and the cup. This was a great match with some truly dumb sequences, all of them starting with yet another fake and completely unnecessary head injury angle. What am I supposed to believe? That the trainer sucks at his job, that Danielson is superhuman, that Hangman operating at 100% cannot overcome a guy who has lost to pretty much every major name in the company already and is injured and has a head injury. Bryan hit one Bazaiku knee and never went for another major move, yet Hangman got caught in a half-ass pinning combination, and he lost. Meanwhile, he takes Deadeye and basically no-sells a buckshot lariat by immediately avoiding one 5 seconds later. It was such a frustrating watch because I loved the first 3 quarters of this match, and I saw it heading for an explosive finish. Combining that ridiculousness with the double blading and commentary pleading with us to believe it was an amazing match was such a turnoff. Others are certainly going to grade it better. For me, this was 4.25 stars, an A. Both guys are capable of more. Bryan, of course, was the right winner. Swerve Hangman can happen anytime, forever. Danielson main eventing All In during his final year as a full-timer. At the end of the day, definitely the right call. Capture Flies 666 at Capture Flies wrote in, can you talk about Nigel's commentary? I get the hatred he has for Bryan, but my God, his commentary really took me away from the match. Yeah, I loved Nigel McGuinness alongside Mauro Ranallo in NXT. And when he started with AEW, he was a breath of fresh air on Collision because I just personally do not enjoy the commentary on Dynamite. And I do enjoy his gimmick with Mariah May and the women and stuff. But man, I'm not sure if his style has changed or he's just being given too much space and too much long of a leash, whereas Mauro dominated so much of the air in NXT. But he is extremely grating to listen to these days. The Bryan stuff, I thought it might build to a match between them at Wembley Stadium, but it's not. So what the fuck is the point of it? Like, I guess they could have a match on a regular Dynamite or a different pay-per-view still. I think AEW is doing a television show. Maybe it's Collision before Wembley. And even though it makes no sense, Bryan has wrestled the night before big pay-per-view matches before. So perhaps they could do it on that show. But I mean, if Danielson's going to win the title, that supersedes obviously having a match against McGuinness in England. The other option is that Nigel costs Bryan at Wembley, which would excuse the loss to Swerve. Not that he needs to be protected, but shit, man. Like, Nigel needs to tone it down until they're at least a couple weeks away from whatever this is leading to. And if it's not going to happen at all, then I just don't get it at all. But yeah, he dominates the broadcast as a heel the way Corey Graves used to as a heel, where it actively distracts from what's happening sometimes, where you kind of want to hear the action being called and instead you're listening to the heel. The reason why, Pat McAfee and Jerry the King Lawler and Booker T these days with Vic Joseph on NXT, the reason those guys work despite being massively outsized personalities is because Michael Cole and, Jim Ross and Vince McMahon back in the day had a stronger handle on running commentary. And I'm not so sure that Excalibur really holds down Nigel the way he needs to and kind of dominates it. Look, the AEW commentary is one of the few parts right now that annoys me to no end. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, telling us 7 times during a match it's amazing and incredible, and how could we ever see a match like this before? Like, it's enough. Tony Schiavone going high-pitched so many different times, it's grating for me, and Nigel certainly adds to that. The best person on commentary that AEW has is Taz, and they wrote him off last week. I don't know if it was for a reason or if it was only for the storyline reason that they gave, but I was very depressed when AEW started and Taz wasn't on there. Let's just put it that way. On Dynamite, Swerve entered after the Bryan and Hangman match was over, with AEW basically telling us, without saying it, to expect a face-to-face after commercial, except Bryan was gone after the break. Swerve said he's now the best in the world after beating Will Ospreay, and it would be an honor to face Danielson, even though he already lost to Ospreay. Bryan did. Then he announced he's going to be on Team AEW for Blood and Guts, promising to do something else Bryan failed at attempting this year, beating the Elite. He said Dynasty era is now upon us, I guess because he's champion. Not a term I've heard used before. Then he randomly offered Kazuchika Okada a match because I guess he's one of the 3 Dynasty guys who's a champion, him, Ospreay, and Swerve. Easily Swerve's worst promo since he won the title. You could hear it in his voice that he just wasn't excited about the words he was saying. It was basically an excuse to get him on TV. If he had said that stuff to Danielson's face, okay, we have a segment, something pretty interesting. But he just said it into the camera. And then he challenged Okada out of nowhere, even though he's another singles champion. Not great, Bob. That match, by the way, is happening next week. With Swerve joining Blood and Guts, it was obvious Hangman would accept the Elite's offer to be their 5th man. That's the right move, and it's exactly what happened later on Dynamite. He knocked on the Elite locker room, said he would do it. There was a fun part of this with Okada answering the door and everyone being wary of him at first. The question is whether they wind up using like dumb kayfabe logic to put Paige in the all-in title match and make it a triple threat. Like, I could see the heels winning Blood and Guts, then them saying, well, since the Owen got to put someone in the match, we get to pick someone as well, and we're putting Heyman, and we're making it a triple threat. Hopefully not, because that would not only be illogical, but it would completely undermine the Owen. And both of those matches should happen individually, but I'm not putting it out of the realm of possibility. On Collision, the TNT Championship was on the line in an open challenge. Jack Perry against, to be announced. So Perry was in the ring, and Marco Stunt answered, got a nice pop as a local guy, obviously a former Jurassic Express member. Perry was surprised, but he beat his ass in 3 minutes and retained the title. There was one fantastic spot, though, where Perry threw Stunt like a javelin into the second turnbuckle, and that should have been the finish, but he kicked out of that. It was ridiculous. On Dynamite, Acclaim did a music video on the Elite, calling them the cancer of wrestling. That was a minute 45 I will never get back. The problem was that it went 2 verses, and it just dragged, and then it ended on a dime. If it ended at the first verse, maybe it would have been okay. My other question is, why haven't they already been announced for Blood and Guts? Now, then we had Darby Allin. I guess he painted Brandon Cutler's face to match his. Then he beat him up backstage. He called Perry and the Elite out for Dynamite 250, but he didn't make a specific challenge. Then a match graphic later showed he's fighting Jack next week, I presume for the TNT title. I guess those 3 could join Swerve and Mark Briscoe. That would make it 5. Then you have Kyle O'Reilly and Orange Cassidy, who would be the odd folks out in that case. So I'm not exactly sure what they're doing, but if Darby's back, then you would expect him in Blood and Guts. On Collision, MJF opened the show with the mic going head-to-head with WWE Money in the Bank. His scarf is now in dark mode. There was a surprising amount of anti-MJF signs, which is actually good to see. He called Daniel Garcia a pawn and a Make-A-Wish kid before focusing on the fans. MJF played the clip from last year about getting bullied for being Jewish. He was angry that he opened his heart and became a babyface for the fans only to hear "Thank you, Joe" chants after World's End, with fans now excited about other wrestlers instead of him. Worst of all, Ospreay. MJF said Ospreay is a child who can't help AEW. He doesn't care about ticket sales, but putting on good matches. Quote, "The only ratings Ospreay cares about are from a guy named Meltzer. I'm a grown-ass man. The only ratings I care about are from a man named Nielsen."
It's got about as much chance of getting over as Orange Cassidy.
Then he faked out the fans by playing Ospreay's entrance. So he called Will a fickle, gutless coward, just like the fans. Now, look, heels do not need to be completely logical. We've covered that many times. But MJF's promo was straight up illogical. First, the fans never turned on him. They popped huge when he returned, gave him an awesome reception. The thank you, Joe, was based on something he said, not because he beat MJF for the title. And this entire promo was completely trite MJF bullshit. The bullying, insulting fans with you people stuff, referring to Wrestling Observer and TV ratings, trying to get a reaction. Who was this promo for? It literally felt like something Tony Khan would put together to pop himself. There's no one in AEW who has a higher ceiling on the mic than MJF. But this was a promo I could have gone in there and cut myself. And that should never, ever be the case when he's in the ring, especially to open the show coming off a major attack and a heel turn. This was massively, massively disappointing. Matt Menard later cut a serious promo saying Garcia lost strength in the left side of his body, but he will make a full recovery. Menard said there was also good news for MJF because he promised Garcia he would be the first one to lay hands on Max. He said when Danny returns, his gimmick will be Red Death instead of Dick Dancing. I guess it's a positive. It was kind of tough to take Menard seriously. On Dynamite, Ospreay opened the show on the mic. Remember when Dynamite always started with wrestling and AEW never wanted to do sports entertainment in-ring promos like this? And remember how every time there was one, Tony Schiavone was there to introduce the person? I digress. Ospreay said there's two reasons MJF doesn't like him. One, the bidding war of 2024 didn't go his way because Tony Khan spent his money on guys like him who will elevate AEW and not bury it. And two, he represents the identity and foundation of AEW, while MJF is selfish and a prick. He dared MJF to come out so Max's music hit, but he only showed up on the big screen saying he's beaten all of the fans' favorites. Again, trite. He says that every single time. And Will is just a flavor of the month. MJF said Ospreay is replaceable, while he's a generational talent, again, trite, that will expose him when they wrestle. Then he challenged him for the title next week, saying Ospreay finally won't wrestle for stars. He'll see them when he gets punched in the face. Ospreay called it adorable, called Max a bitch, and he obviously accepted the challenge. You all know I've been quite complimentary of Ospreay's promos in AEW, despite mic work not really being his strong suit. I think the only criticism I've ever given him was how he kept looking at and then off the camera to the side over and over again, like that first one or two promos that he cut. He actually delivered everything fine here, but the content was weak as shit. First, how did the bidding war not go MJF's way? He got paid out the ass. That's some expensive shit. And the tattoo was because he got paid out of the ass. So now the heat between them is over match ratings, TV ratings, and contract numbers. Real exciting stuff. The second line about Ospreay representing what AEW is supposed to be, it hit better, but it was like a second thought. I cannot imagine next week's match is going to happen in totality. I expect an MJF attack that lays out Ospreay. Maybe it never even starts, and then they do the match at All In. Or maybe they wrestle for a bit, MJF blatantly cheats, gets disqualified. This feud needs far more heat, and it's obviously way too significant of a match to give away on TV in front of 2,000 people in Little Rock, Arkansas. Now look, my birthday is Tuesday, Dynamite's Wednesday, the show is loaded, so it feels like Silver King might be getting a birthday gift if this entire show goes off as planned. But again, it's the 250th Dynamite, and it's in Little Rock. No offense to Arkansas. Little Rock's a nice place. I've been there. I've driven through. No harm, no hate. But there's no one going to this show, and they put all these big matches on it. So that's why I believe the heat will truly start building next week after something nefarious happens in this match. By the way, Will actually tweeted after the show about making a mistake during his promo. I'm not sure if he's referring to the same criticism I shared or something else, but personally, I do like how open and forthcoming he is about stuff on Twitter. Seems to have a really fun personality. He normally doesn't take things too seriously either, which is why when he does, it always comes across like weird and forced, such as grinding on the boss's daughter and all that bullshit. On Rampage, Mariah May beat Hikaru Shida to advance to the finals of the Women's Owen. This main evented went 11 minutes. Shida hit a vertical suplex off the apron from the second rope inside. Shida blocked hip attack, but May completely and ridiculously no-sold a German suplex and a Falcon Arrow, as commentary told us this was a great match. Then she hit hip attack, and they botched a pin count that should have ended the match. Mariah ultimately won with a trap bridge pinfall as a counter to the Katana. The right winner, messy in the finish. On Collision, Toni Storm beat Trish Adora with Storm Zero in 8 minutes. During the match, she asked for a standing ovation. On Dynamite, we had Mariah against Willow Nightingale in the Owen final. This was the main event, which was nice to see. Willow had Owen Hart tribute gear, the black and yellow Danger singlet from when he was in Nation of Domination. Very iconic, Very cool. May hit a hip attack and a DDT. Willow came back with a fisherman's buster, but May countered a pounce with a headbutt. Someone in a black hoodie distracted Willow as Toni Storm argued with the referee. Chris Statlander booted Nightingale in the head, and the guy in the hoodie was obviously Stokely Hathaway. May hit a pump knee and a trap pinning combination for false finishes. Willow hit a cannonball, but May countered Dr. Bomb into a rollover for the victory. 2-0 finals, both ending in pinning combinations because wrestlers just can't lose matches regularly with finishers in AEW. Storm fully celebrated with May, hugging her, jumping around. They ran up the ramp to go get the title and the cup. Mariah grabs the strap and all of a sudden beats the ever-loving shit out of Toni with it. Storm bladed even though it never came near her face. Then May hit Luther, and he just took a swan dive off the stage through a table. Mariah grabbed one of Toni's heels and started stabbing her in the head with it multiple times. Then she pushed a referee. Then she kissed all of the blood on Storm's head. Fans chanted, "You sick fuck," and Dynamite ended. Now, the match started super slow. It was rather frustrating. It picked up in the latter half. I didn't think these two had great chemistry. I would have expected that they would, so that was disappointing. Bump that, though, because the post-match was excellent. One of the best finishes to a Dynamite, maybe not just this year, but ever, and the best moment on the entire episode Wednesday. Also, probably the best or one of the best women's segments in the history of AEW. The turn itself wasn't surprising. I saw a lot of people thinking, oh, Storm's going to turn on May. Why? She got in her good graces. She expects people will kiss her feet as part of this gimmick. So the turn wasn't surprised. I always expected May was going to be the one going heel. But the way it was executed was, chef's kiss. The suddenness of Mariah just destroying Toni without even a second thought. That's the type of juice AEW has sorely been lacking in its women's storylines. The Luther bump was a laugh, but kind of in a good way. And May looked diabolical going after her mentor immediately once she had the possibility of taking her gold on the table. Other than the blading, which I was fine with in this case, but it should have happened after the heel shots, not before. This was basically a perfect post-match segment. First time in a long time, something in AEW has made me actually say, oh shit, unexpectedly. It was a tad repetitive, just given MJF's turn last week. It was so similar to that. But again, the quality of it and the surprising timing completely made up for that. I just wish they had spaced it out a little bit. But again, Mariah played it perfectly. Toni was great as well, laying there like a dead fish, sobbing. Now Storm is officially a face, which is a bonus on top of it for all of those who really like her. We need a strong promo from May next week saying she's an understudy to nobody and such. And that would really bring it all the way home. Like I said, one of the best endings to Dynamite, if not the best this year. One of the best women's segments in AEW history. Full stop. They should be really proud of themselves for executing this. On Dynamite, Mercedes Moné came out for a champagne toast celebration, given her party last week was interrupted by Britt Baker. She thanked the Young Bucks for extra ringside security, promising she wouldn't be interrupted. So obviously, she was going to be interrupted. She did Bret Hart's best there is line, but she screwed up the order. Still, it got heat. They were in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. She said she'd leave Baker for dead if they ever fought, and then she poured something that was not champagne into a shot glass. Britt interrupted, punched and kicked two security guards, and then just walked past the rest of them as Mercedes ran off. Now, the gimmick of Mercedes doing a celebration each week until one goes smoothly, that would be pretty fun if they continue it next week and beyond. But given this was exactly what happened last week, only less eventful, given neither of them said anything, it was a total waste of time. It's interesting that I kind of get like Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks vibes from these two being around one another, just without the aura. This was a womp womp, but again, if they keep the gimmick going, that might be cool. I did wonder, based on Mercedes quoting Brett here, whether there might be something to the idea of like Natalya going over to AEW, especially since there's now an open challenge set for the TBS title next week. I've been anticipating Natalya re-signing with WWE, and she's still on their roster page, unlike Ricochet. But it is curious the way this is playing out. At the same time, if you were going to debut Natty, wouldn't you do it in Calgary and not Little Rock, Arkansas? So yeah, I just figured it was worth a mention. I still don't think it's happening as of today, but the possibility's out there. On Rampage, Samoa Joe cut a promo on Chris Jericho, hoping he had faith in the AEW medical staff and trainers because he was going to massacre him and tear him apart. Top tier, as usual, from him. On Dynamite, we had Joe against Jericho in a Stampede street fight. Jericho dumped out a bag of metal horseshoes but got slammed into them. He avoided Muscle Buster with a dropkick off the ropes. They fought backstage with Joe taking coffee to the face. He avoided Judas Effect into Coquina Clutch when suddenly Big Bill and Brian Keith both attacked. Jericho punched Joe with a belt buckle. He got chokeslammed onto a pallet on top of a forklift. Then Jericho drove that through a piece of drywall. We saw Colt Cabana for the first time in years, and Jericho won via doctor's stoppage. Joe then got loaded into an ambulance. Where were Hook and Katsuyori Shibata? Joe literally walks around with his own trio, and they were nowhere to be found. I didn't mind this overall. The idea was to show that everything Jericho's doing is an act, though of course we already knew that. And he's actually just a massive piece of shit. The only issue was there just wasn't a holy shit moment. Seeing the forklift pierce the drywall before it broke, and knowing that Joe didn't even really take a minor bump, he was just laying on something, got driven into nothing, and then fell on the ground. It kind of hurt the believability of the entire deal. That said, this was done to write off Joe for season 2 of Twisted Metal, which is a great show, by the way, on Peacock. Hopefully the pieces of this all fit together, because as of right now, I'm not totally sure why you would get this trio storyline started if the main focal point for the faces was not going to be back for months. What are you going to do with Hook and Shibata between now and then? I guess we'll find out soon. On Collision, Claudio Castagnoli beat the Beast Mortos in 12 minutes. Claudio did the swing and won with a lariat. Second best match on the show, but it had no reason for happening. On Rampage, Konosuke Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher beat Private Party in 10 minutes. Fletcher won with an inverted tombstone piledriver, which really more people should do that move. Then we saw footage of Callis recruiting Roosh, which seemed to be a really easy pitch. And it was weird this didn't air after the Roosh match, but instead aired here. Speaking of him, Roosh beat Commander in 12 minutes. On Rampage, Don Callis was on commentary, and we learned that he's officially recruiting Roosh. Commander hit a nice 450, but then botched a crucifix bomb and a roundhouse kick. Then he half-sold a toss belly-to-belly suplex off the apron outside. Not an impressive effort by him. Roosh won with bull's horns. Better than most Rampage matches. Still nothing I would call good. Then we have this random ass match for a international championship number 1 contendership on Dynamite. Claudio, Fletcher, Pac, and Tomohiro Ishii. And this is happening even though Ospreay's literally defending the title next week. I'm not even going to bother looking up Fletcher's record again. It's just not worth it. There was a cool spot where 3 guys ran into the corner hitting big moves one after another. Pac caught Fletcher with a perfect Poison Rana. Claudio swung Fletcher and put him in a sharpshooter. Pac hit him with a driving elbow and then broke the hold and added a brutalizer. Ishii broke both and murdered Fletcher with a lariat. Claudio hit neutralizer on Fletcher, who also ate Black Arrow. And then we saw Claudio just standing there watching from outside doing nothing as Pac locked in brutalizer for an immediate tap-out victory. After the bell, Pac refused to be denied a moment at Wembley Stadium and drew a line in the sand. This may be controversial, but I thought this was almost as good as Danielson and Hangman. It was an excellent 4-way, constant action, some really creative spots. Outside of Claudio's flub in the finish, it was as much as you could want from a TV match. I went 4 stars A- here. On the back end of this, Tony Khan announced that Ishii will do a summer excursion in AEW. I hope he gets something to sink his teeth into and not just be put in matches to be put in matches. Stone Pitbull, you guys know who have listened to me for a long time. He's long been my favorite New Japan guy, perhaps one of the most underrated in the entire world, just when it comes to skill versus notoriety. On Rampage, Undisputed Kingdom got angry about the conglomeration existing and Kyle O'Reilly being aligned with them. Roderick Strong reminded KOR that he's better with him. It's crazy that he is the best promo out of this group, a guy who always struggled to speak on the mic. On Rampage, O'Reilly beat something called GPA in 90 seconds. The idea here was that he was more aggressive than usual. He walked away from Kingdom trying to celebrate with him. And then on Collision, the conglomeration beat the Iron Savages and Jack Jameson in 8 minutes. Kingdom was on commentary. They argued from the stage with the faces after the bell. This was a total waste of time. On Collision, Serena Deeb cut a taped promo on Rio, willing to run their match back from 2021. She said she's evolved into the best in-ring women's wrestler in AEW, which is clearly not true given her losing streak. Perhaps I missed it, but I didn't see where this challenge came from on behalf of Rio, so I have no idea what Deeb was talking about. Obviously, there'll be a quality match between them should it happen, which I'm sure it will. I also have no idea why they continue to let her cut promos pretty much every week. She's awful on the mic.
Yeah, all your sports teams, they're all failures.
On Collision, Rio beat Lady Frost in 9 minutes, hitting Kofi Kingston's SOS. AEW has an entire women's division and continues to use non-contracted talent or ROH talent for their lone women's matches per show. It's an absolute joke. Something was off here. Frost hit a nice cartwheel twirling crash and a moonsault, but the match wasn't good. Look, it's clear that the AEW women's division is improving, but it boggles my mind why they don't use real talent on every single show and occasionally have 2 matches on Dynamite. It just doesn't make any sense. On Collision, there was a face-off between Top Flight's crew and Shane Taylor Promotions. This was 6 dudes all trying to act hard, but the only 2 who were at all believable were Taylor and Anthony Ogogo. And that wraps up AEW this week. Again, Dynamite strong, Rampage and Collision, just an absolute slog to get through. Now, look, we have been cutting a ton of performance-enhancing audio here for you at Getting Over the last couple of weeks. The Silver King needs to rest his voice, okay? There's a big SmackDown coming up on Friday, a big Raw coming up on Monday following the return of Rhea Ripley. So, of course, we will be back on Tuesday with our next WWE episode, which will be the first birthday show for the Silver King in the history of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. And then we will be back on Thursday with your next NXT and AEW show. Between now and then, you can remember that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
It's all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover, sign up. You will get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news posts every Friday. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. We would appreciate your financial support. Thank you all for listening, of course, to this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. It is time for the Silver King to sign off and leave you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.